Welcome to Fangoria's Colors of the Dark podcast. I'm your host, Elric Kane, and joining me is the ever sick and falling apart Dr. Rebekah McKendry? Question mark?
I'm fucking falling apart, man. I'm just done. No, it's been a slightly rough day. I got sick and was not expecting that. But I'm mustering through it.
Shouldn't you apologize? Because anyone listening to this who lives in Montreal, this would be out on Friday, which means yesterday they did not see you live. As promised,
Yes.
you were going to be live.
I had to make a call this morning over whether or not I was well enough to fly, or even more of a concern, whether I wanted to take whatever incredibly bad thing I have to Montreal and give it to entire film crews. And so I had to make the call, and I opted to stay here and miss out on all the fun and merriment rather than inoculate Elric on the plane and all of his crew right along.
Yeah, that
with
part
it.
I didn't really want, I must admit.
I know.
I do want to at least make it to my premiere. Everything else
I'm gonna
is
be
like
shoved
whatever.
in coach with everybody, and I'm just gonna, die, and they're just gonna have to, feel my outbreak. And yeah, I just figured it was not the best way that I should spend my Tuesday evening. So I ended up having to make a call. Plus, it had to be a question of, if I get to Montreal and I'm feeling like shit, how good am I going to be on the stage? We will be fine. The show will go on.
Well, we don't know yet. We haven't confirmed.
We're hoping.
But I will tell you, the show did not go well because it's Friday. And yesterday it was a mess. Oh my God. Chuck didn't show up. I was drunk as hell.
Elric forgot pants. He was
I turned it into
drunk.
like a comedy special, like a one-person thing, and boy, did it get rough.
Where did you even find that hippo? I have no idea.
I did a set on, it's just, it got pretty bad. It's about toxic masculinity and just got ugly. And by the end.
Don't go blue, Elric. Just don't go blue.
So,
and you did. You did.
It went poorly,
No.
but we'll see. Now we'll dial it back to the present and hope that it doesn't. But yeah, so I have no idea what that's going to look like, but I believe I'll still be talking to Chuck Russell one way or the other. And maybe even it'll be recorded, and brought back to here. Who knows?
I believe so. We might be releasing this as a bonus episode.
Mostly sad you don't get to see the movie on the big screen, because now you're going to have to wait to a different festival because I'll only show it on the big screen.
Oh,
yeah, I'm hardcore. I'm hardcore.
Such a purist. Oh my gosh.
They tried to make me on the other Pure Cinema, and I said, nope, you're going to see it on the screen. We're going to get an LA screening somehow.
Well, I think we can definitely do that.
Yeah, we got
so that won't be too hard to wrangle.
But we can't organize live shows anymore because something always bad happens. It feels like it's cursed. It's cursed.
No,
cursed.
Cursed. No. I think this is the only live show that we've had to cancel. So
I don't know.
Yeah, I will muster through this, and then we will be back and fighting for the next one.
All right.
But on the upside, we saw some good stuff this week. We actually saw Longlegs the night that it premiered. So this was like 2 weeks ago. And Elric was so excited that he was suddenly like, can we drop an episode a week early? We got to do this. We got to talk about Longlegs right now. And I have to tell you, the most exciting thing about Longlegs for me, we're going to dig in spoiler free. We'll wait one more week before we get a little bit more spoiler.
No, I was thinking we can talk. Oh, you mean talking about now? Or you're talking about what we were going to do?
Oh, don't confuse people.
Oh, yeah.
So what I was going to say is that, not having spoilers at this point, what made me most excited about Longlegs and immediately fall in love with it is the fact that we went with a couple of friends, Ryan Spindell and Billy Ray Bruton. And afterwards, we found ourselves outside the theater with ample theories about what was going on and all the different stuff that we saw. And the fact that it did not answer every question and spoon feed you the mythology, and that at the end we were all out there coming up with theories about why this person was dressed this way, or why this was going on, that was amazing. I miss cinema like that. I miss that. I'm going to call it the David Lynchian style movies, where every question is not answered. And some of the shit is just so disjointed, it doesn't ever get explained. And you can sit outside afterwards and discuss it like cinema. I miss that shit. And so it was just wonderful to have that back.
Yeah, no, I mean, I could tell I was loving it from the start pretty much. I mean, as soon as the frame expanded, the aspect ratio changed. It's just, I miss being in the hands of something purposeful, even when all choices don't always work, but they're big swings. Every choice was a swing. And unlike Gretel and Hansel, where you never felt you felt the style of the director, but you never felt the authorial clarity of the voice, like he fully knew the story. That one doesn't really have that, and I think that's what undercuts that film a bit. And I think he even talked about in an interview that he didn't even really know it wasn't he didn't write that one. I think he's written all the other films. This one I did feel like, even if it's something being left out, I feel like the creator knows what they're creating here. It's definitely in the dark spell category of a movie. It's not about being scary so much that everyone was like, oh, is it going to be the scariest? It's like, yeah, it can be scary moments or it can be unsettling, but it's more about, there feels like there's a darkness inherent to what you're watching. And there's a few scenes that images I'll never forget, especially well, I could say dull type things. That's obviously part of it. I think in the second half, what I was alluding to, I think it's been 2 weeks since Longlegs come out, so like go see it. But I think it's pointless not to get more spoilery from here. Otherwise, there's no point really saying anything because everyone already knows it's pretty good, and it made $20 million in its opening weekend, which is an absolute home run from Neon. So I think in the second half of this episode, when we are talking about a few serial killer kind of deep cuts or just favorites that aren't the canon, I guess is what we were saying. We can link back to some of the more spoilery moments of Longlegs. That way, if you want to avoid it, you can wait till there. But also the cast is great. Like Michael Monroe's really great.
Oh, good.
Cage is obviously doing something very special. Blair Underwood's a surprise. Alicia Witt's kind of the MVP. It's just, I just love seeing something that purposeful and strange. And when it's a hit and it's that weird, it's got to be celebrated because, we don't get many movies like that in a year. So
yeah. No, it was just outstanding. The visuals were outstanding. How it was constructed was outstanding. Like, it was just an absolute blast. And even at the end of it, the fact that it didn't answer all the questions, it was just like, wait, never mind. Let's just go with it. Cool movie. Like, that made it all the better that it left some questions open. So yeah.
One minor.
Longlegs.
So I'll put a spoiler warning here. I'm going to mentioned in an interview, a great, like one of the best I've heard of a movie. And I think you should listen to it too, because I think they're just hearing the personal side of what is in Longlegs. So this is a spoiler because he's relating it to his life. But the mother character in this movie, played by Alicia Witt, the sacrifices a parent makes and the secrets a parent keeps from a child, very interesting, because he related it to his mother hid that their father was gay and that Anthony Perkins was gay, and for their whole life, until they were much older, and it was a big deal. Like, it was not just a small lie, a big one that deeply impacted their entire family life. But as far as he was saying, it was out of love, it was out of protection. And so I love the way he takes deeply personal things in all his movies. In fact, all of them have, like the first film, Black Coat's Daughter, the parents die in the opening of that movie, which is exactly what happened in his life. So you have these things, but then he changes the meaning and the context completely. So it stops being autobiographical and it becomes the genre. But I think that's such a great writing lesson, to take what's personal but then bury it into the fabric of genre. It's a really good interview because he does not hold much back about some of the connections between this and his life, and I think that's on The Big Picture with Sean Fantasy interview. So look out for that if you want to hear that.
Yeah. So I'll start by saying the new season of Evil, I've been doing updates for the past couple of shows on it, and I just wanted to say, oh my God, it's so good. If you're not watching it, please jump in. I am just incredibly bummed that this is the end. But that said, I love that it's going out on a high note, because there are so many shows that I watched for years and years and years that I'm kind of like, it petered off in season 8 and things like that. I'm looking at you, Walking Dead. But that said, like, this is 4 seasons. It's going out tight. It's going out with amazing episodes. So if you haven't been watching Evil, this is like the perfect time to jump right in. So with that, let me take us to, I've got a bunch of really good ones. You know what? Let's go to In a Violent Nature. Because I watched this, I completely forgot. I watched this while I was on summer vacation and meant to talk about it on our first episode back, and then completely forgot because it had been several weeks since I'd watched it. And so In a Violent Nature, this definitely had some play in late June, early July, where everybody was posting about it. And so, of course, I was curious and had to check it out. I kept hearing most violent film that we've seen in years. I don't know if I would put it into that category, but that said, it was super fucking violent, which was really, I don't know how to describe this, but I'm going to go as far to say the most relaxing slasher film I've ever seen.
Yeah, it's funny. You say it's
Um,
violent, but it's only really got a couple violent moments. The rest is like almost meditative. It's
Meditation,
like
that's
weird.
exactly it. It is because it's got like a little bit of backstory where this guy was like burned alive and buried. His name's Johnny. And then these kids show up and they pull a locket from this like burnt down fire tower. And then that awakens him. And now he's hunting him down. And that's honestly like 10 minutes up at the top of the movie. And it's kind of superfluous because then you just get into kind of what I'm going to call an almost subliminal style of the movie, because it kind of just does become this meta analysis of what a slasher film is, because you're ultimately trailing the slasher the entire time. I apologize for the coughing, y'all. It's going to happen this week. So the way that the movie is basically constructed is you're following the killer in a woods film, in a kind of cabin in the woods film. And so it's him as he spends roughly like 10 minutes walking very peacefully and slowly through the woods. And these are beautiful woods, beautiful sunlit day. And then he happens upon a camper and brutally kills them. And then you get this amazing kill scene for like 5 to 8 minutes. And then you move into another 10-minute walk through the woods. And it is beautiful. And the kills are great. There's not plot. You're not bogged down by who the characters are or who these people are that he's killing or what their relationship is or anything like that. It is just walking through the woods and then killing. The majority of it is filmed. It's still from like a third person omniscient style, even though that you're following the killer, because the majority of it is like a steady cam from just over his shoulder. Like you see him walking in front. So it almost, if I have any old school video game fans here, it feels like you're playing the Friday the 13th video game from back in the 80s, and that you're following Jason around while he kills people. During the last like 15 minutes, it goes to first person POV. I did not like that. Like it still was cool, and I appreciated what they were doing, that they were truly putting you into the eyes of the character. But it was not as relaxing as kind of comfortably following him through the whole thing. Once you were in POV, it got more jarring, it got more shaky. It definitely felt like a sharp shift. And I understand why they did it. It just, that end part wasn't as comfortable for me. Quite possibly, I would say one of the best kill scenes. I'm just going to say it, the best kill scene of the year inside this movie. It has become kind of known online as just the yoga scene. And you can just Google the yoga scene in a violent nature, and it shit'll pop right up. And it is just a beautiful kill scene.
It got
And
my
that makes
Fangoria
sense.
award nominated with my vote. So
I don't think I'm allowed to vote, but it
I
would have
voted.
gotten
So
mine. Yeah. Definitely I would call it the best kill scene of the year. It was just one of those where I was like, oh God, is it? And it just keeps going and going and going. And it's shot just so well. So yeah, this was a treat. Don't go in expecting a standard horror film. And the biggest thing that I will say that I saw a lot of people complaining about, don't go in expecting scares. When you're reverse engineering a horror film like this, you're completely eliminating the idea of scares and tension, because the tension is built from the moment that you know that the woman is over here setting up her campsite and that Jason's like over there and getting closer. That's where the tension's built. If you are Jason and you're just walking on over to her, no fucks given, there is no tension. So they don't even try for it. Like there's no like building score or anything like that. But that said, this is really something different and something that I did not expect to like nearly as much as I did. Again, I found it relaxing, which is probably something really fucked up about me. But there was just something so simplistic about it, minimalistic, that just made it lovely. So in a violent nature,
yeah, I'd like to see
best
it on a.
relaxing horror film a
I'd
year.
like to see it on a big screen. I missed it on a big screen. I saw the screener early and I liked it. And I thought it was definitely an exercise, like a very interesting
Mhm.
experimental exercise. But I think seeing it on a big screen, maybe that scale would help with some, not so much of the tension, but just getting you inside the movie a little more.
Yeah.
But it's really interesting. Definitely one of the most interesting films made this year.
I like baller film moves, and this was a fucking baller film move. So
Yeah.
well done, Chris Nash.
Yeah, and he's definitely an effects guy in real life too. He's done effects on lots of movies.
Hmm.
So I'll go to a straight slasher. Straight is a very in quote marks with this particular movie, because this particular movie, don't say I don't work hard for our money. Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey #2.
Wow.
Oof.
Did you watch Winnie the Pooh, Blood and
Number
Honey
two.
number
Oh,
one?
I
No.
did.
Did
I
you see
did.
the first one?
Yeah,
Okay.
I did because people said it was the worst movie ever made or whatever, and I watched it and it wasn't the worst movie. In fact, it had a couple good moments, but was, kind of dumb. But this is the same director, Reese Frake Waterfield. And what I'll say is there's a couple movies I've seen the last week that I'm not talking about today because I really didn't care for them. And I feel like at a certain point, I don't really want to just rag on things. So they're not even going to be mentioned today. Winnie the Pooh, I'm bringing up because while I don't think it's a good movie, it's very well made. And it's what's surprising about these movies, both of them, is that they are, and the thing I appreciate, I'm not sure if everyone does, but what I really appreciate is these are not tongue-in-cheek movies. These are completely straight, so almost no jokes at all, slasher films with that happen to take these characters we know, and instead of playing them as silly things, they play them as ugly, grotesque versions of themselves. And the first one just had it just seemed kind of dumb. It's hard to explain beyond that, but even the idea. And Christopher Robin, I guess the idea was that he used to play with them when they were young, and then of course he grew out of it. His imagination went, so he leaves the forest and just becomes a normal kid. But then these things were left and abandoned. They grew into these deformed, ugly versions of themselves, like neon maniac type versions of themselves. And then when some teenagers come, they killed them. In the events of #2, the massacre that went down in one has been documented and even turned into a feature film that people are commenting on. And Christopher Robin is in treatment and therapy, but he works at a hospital. And then what it does, I'd say if you don't want to know anything about it, it's kind of impossible.
I have to say, I do enjoy the Blair Witch 2 approach
Yeah, right. The Book of Shadows of Winnie the Pooh.
Yeah, it's very Book of Shadows.
Yeah, but then, okay, so if you don't listen for right now, if you don't want to know anything, you want to go in blind, like I said, there are actually very good kills and gore in this movie, and I think the director actually comes off looking pretty good as a showreel piece. Do I care? No, I don't care as I'm watching, but it's well made. What's interesting about this one, it takes a huge swing story-wise, which I appreciated, and so spoilery. That twist is that, in fact, the Christopher Robin's brother, when he was a little kid, they decide this will be his backstory, was abducted. It has a bit of a Black Phone vibe, and he never saw his brother again. We come to learn that a mad scientist who was abducting children did genetic experiments and turned these children into mutant hybrids with the creatures, and that thus Piglet, Owl, and Tigger were born. So that wasn't in the first one. So in this one, it's actually mutant hybrids. And I'm sitting there going, this is like 30 minutes in. I'm like, all right, whatever, I'll watch. It's just like, it was just so kind of bonkers that I was like, yeah, all right. So I can't say it's good. I'm a completist sometimes. And I was like, it came on. I was like, I'm curious. I do think they made a better movie. I think if you're looking for it, like, it's the opposite of In a Violent Nature, because the things that even though it's not a totally successful slasher, but it is a slasher, and there's a couple scenes that do give you a good gore, good jump, good quick scare. But because of the IP, you can never really buy into it. If this didn't have the IP of Winnie the Pooh, I probably wouldn't be watching it, but it would probably be a better film, So it's kind of funny. But anyway, it was interesting. But again, like I said, perfectly well made and written. Like, they didn't make a bad movie. It's just not, There's some people will definitely think it's a bad movie, but not in terms of craft. I think in terms of craft, they can hold their head up, despite making a film called Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey 2.
Mad respect for that,
not easy.
because same with the people who are getting ready to do the Mickey Mouse movie. Like, that is a wild thing to say. Yeah. Okay, that's public domain. Like, it feels exploitive, and it is. Yeah. But I kind of love, it's what I was saying before. It's a baller move to be like, oh, well, Winnie the Pooh's game, horror movie, that shit. I love that somebody is right there ready to do that.
And me, like, if it was tongue in cheek, if they were making jokes and winks, I couldn't even last a minute in a movie like that. But because they don't, there's a part of me that's it's just a slasher film where the guy happens to look like Winnie the Pooh, a deformed, kind of messed up Winnie the Pooh. So I don't know, kind of had some half fun watching it,
That's awesome.
Wait, you still didn't see Oddity though, right?
It's not on Shudder yet, and I don't have a screening link.
I thought it came on Shudder on Friday.
No, it's not there yet. I tried twice now. I think
you're right. It's in theaters. Okay. Well,
it's in theaters.
I will just do one more plug.
Send me the link.
I will do one more plug, because if it's in theaters, it really is in the top couple of the year so far. It's genuinely kind of gets under your skin, a little creepy. I think it's got all the hallmarks of saying that you especially will really enjoy, because
I can't wait.
I'll just keep talking about it because you can't see it.
Thanks. Yeah.
But yes, that's the
I'd
oddity.
love to watch it now that I'm stuck home sick for a couple of days. I'd really love to watch that. So
Can't
yeah.
watch it's not playing
Yeah,
in Montreal, so you can't do that.
it's not playing in Montreal. But that said, so a couple of nights ago, I went to Shutter with the intention of finding
Mhm.
Oddity. Didn't find it, but instead I saw EXHUMA.
Oh yeah,
And I suddenly went, I remember Elric mentioning this one as well and mentioning that you'd liked this maybe 2 shows back. I think it was
I
like our
think so.
first
Yeah,
show back from break. And so I was like, you know what? I'll go ahead and watch EXHUMA. This is South Korean, and I fucking
it's
loved this
great. Yeah,
movie. So this was a really good recommendation. Just really cool mythology across the board. And honestly, if you'd asked me 20 minutes in, I was kind of like, yeah, it's okay. But by like the hour mark, it got really creepy. Like you compared it to The Wailing,
yeah.
and I would give it that same vibe as well. So it's a this really young, hot female shaman. And she's got this like protege. And they are hired to figure out what is wrong with this really wealthy family who's got like this big history. They're just this really wealthy family. The one of the couple's newborn son has some type of malady that doctors can't figure out. Like it won't quit crying. It hasn't stopped crying for months. They have to sedate it all the time because it's so out of control. It's basically possessed. And so they're trying to figure out what's wrong with their son, and doctors have not figured it out. So they've hired this like incredibly skilled shaman. And she says that what it is this deceased family member is not resting peacefully, has gone like crazy wild, and therefore it's haunting the newborn son. And that they have to find which family member is not resting peacefully and, dig him up and then do all this magical stuff so that he rests more peacefully. And so she starts going through the family history, trying to figure out which one of the dead family members it could be. And then along the way, she enlists a mortician and a feng shui expert that she works with regularly. And they're just super fun. So now we've got like 2 shamans, the mortician, and a feng shui expert who are going to go figure out which family member is gone like full demonic and pissed off. And what they find is this super isolated rural grave that they all are like, holy shit, getting real bad vibes off this one. It's got to be this guy. And this is like my favorite scene because all 4 of them are together and they're like, do we do it? And then they're like, exhumation. But they say it like
Hmm.
intervention to the family. It's like intervention. Like it was just this massive, very bleak family event that took place where they dig it up. And it just keeps getting creepier and creepier and creepier from there as soon as they get the body out of the ground. And this one had a lot of twists that I'm not going to get into, but gets super creepy, gets big into the history of the family, starts digging up a lot of the family history, a lot of stuff that they had kind of, wanted to keep buried. Hey, check that out. It's symbolic. And it also, by the end, it gets a lot into demons as well and gets kind of supernatural. So really loved this one and was not expecting to. This was a really great watch. So that is EXHUMA, which is currently on Shutter.
And it's kind of long, and it almost
It is. It was like 2.5 hours.
feels like a whole season of a TV show. Like in one,
Yeah.
because of all the characters, all the fun. You really could have made that a 1 season show, and it would have been really cool because the characters are really fun. The mythology is pretty deep, and it's already kind of long. Yeah, it's definitely one of the most interesting movies this year. I definitely think people should jump on that.
I would have watched a full season of that because it's the shaman, her young protege, and she's just so great. And then the mortician and the feng shui expert thrown into the mix. It's just like this amazing ensemble. And it's funny, which is where it gets like The Wailing. Like it has these moments where it's absolutely hilarious and darkly comedic. And then 2 seconds later, it gets super creepy. So yeah, it works. It just worked really, really well. So EXHUMA, this one's already on Shutter.
Already on Shutter, so watch that while you wait for Oddity. Okay, one that is not on Shutter. It's still in theaters for a little while, and then I'm not sure where it's going. Probably somewhere on demand. Boy, oh boy, this was one that my friend Oren kept telling me to see, and it is dynamite. Like one of the best things I've seen this year. I watched it just like really just now, like earlier today, and it's called Humanist Vampire Seeking Consenting Suicidal Person, directed by Ariane Louis Says. And interestingly enough, it's shot in Montreal, which I was not expecting. And won a bunch of awards, I guess, last year, or in its festival run. And this is the most delightful, charming. This is the most charming movie I've seen this year in any genre. it's horror because there's horror characters, but it is not a scary horror film. It is a there's this young girl who is you don't know for the first minute, but pretty quickly you realize her whole family are vampires, and they're trying to get her to show her teeth finally because she's never done it. So they've invited a clown over for her birthday, and the clown doesn't realize that he's really on the menu. And the girl just won't do it. She has too much empathy for humans, and she just doesn't want to do it. So they have to feed her, blood packets, and she has yet to feed on a person. And her family's super nice. They're not like psycho and scary vampires, but this is the code of their life. And it's shot a little bit almost Wes Anderson-y. I kind of wrote down it was kind of like Ginger Snaps vibe mixed with somewhere between that and Girl Who Walks Home Alone, but with a Wes Anderson aesthetic. And it's really just charming is the best way to put it. And the funny thing is the main girl, who at the end of this I was like, man, I really like this girl. She kind of is playing the girl from Beetlejuice. It has a little bit of her Winona Ryder's character,
Lydia.
a little bit of Lydia, like a little bit older, but a little bit of that quiet. And it turns out this actress Sarah Montpetit is from the movie I loved last year. It's like almost my number one non-horror film last year called Falcon Lake. She's the same girl. So I was like, oh, so she's clearly someone to keep watching. So then it cuts, and now we are the bulk of the story. We are her as she looks 15, 16, but is actually 60. And it's just her life. And she still has not fed on a person. And so what the movie is about is she's still unwilling, but her family's getting really kind of fed up. Her teeth have finally popped out, which means she had the vibrations of wanting to bite into someone, but she resists and is unwilling to hurt someone, unlike the rest of her vamp cohort. And she doesn't know what to do. And one day she's walking down the street, and she also plays like a keyboard, and that's what she does, plays keyboard out in public at night. And one day she's walking down the street, she looks up, and there's this young teenage boy, an 18-year-old teenage outcast, and he is on top of a roof thinking of jumping, but then he kind of backs off and he works the local bowling alley. And then the thought becomes, could she have the blood of somebody who wants to die anyway? And it becomes kind of, no, I wouldn't say quite a romance, but it becomes a friendship movie between the two of them, and them trying to figure out how maybe they can help each other. And that leads to things that come up that don't go right. And it is just, I wouldn't say more than that because it's such a slight in terms of story, but it's really, really fun. I think you will love it. And just because,
so sweet.
Yeah, it's sweet and it's not dumb. So it's sweet without being cheesy. It's doing these tropes in a way that I just haven't quite seen attacked in this way. And it's simple, but really playful. So people are in for a treat when this does come to streaming, but it is still in cities if you can get out to a theater. So once again, it's a funny title: Humanist Vampire Seeking Consenting Suicidal Person. And it's French language, Canadian, So very fun movie. Nice.
And this one is in theaters currently
in theaters. I think it's at the very tail. I think it'll be on demand real soon because I think it's been in theaters for a couple weeks.
Okay. Okay, you know what? Next, I'm going to call this like one of my favorite ones that I've watched in a couple of weeks, which is wild because I knew nothing about it. So this was an Amazon recommendation where I had finished watching something. I think it was probably like an episode of Evil. And then down there at the You May Also Like, it listed this film called Thine Ears Will Bleed. Did I say that? Thy Ears Shall Bleed.
I saw you log this and I'd never heard of it. I was like, what is this?
Me neither. And it was just a picture of like a woman's mouth with ears, and there was blood pouring out of them. And she had needles stuck in each of them. And it popped up and it was like movies that I'd seen before. It was like The Watchers and, Smile. And it was like all of these like major hits. And then this one. And so immediately I went down. It was like, what is this? And I click on it, and it has like 2 reviews. Like no one had watched this, but they were both really good. So then immediately I look on Rotten Tomatoes, and on Rotten Tomatoes, it has 2 reviews. Like Variety and one other outfit had reviewed it, but they were both really good. And I was like, if it's getting these great reviews, why isn't this getting a lot more great reviews? So, okay, my interest was definitely piqued. So I decided to rent Thine Ears Shall Bleed. And this was very much like an impulsive rent. This was good. Like for one that I did not even have on my radar, this was surprisingly good. It is period piece. And I have a feeling that is what is going to be off-putting to some people because it's 1860s pioneer times, like people traveling across the US. And it is in 1860s speech. So it is a lot of like, thou must come this way, wife. and things like that. And you get used to it. But I remember for the first 5 minutes of the movie, I was like, oh, this dialogue is taxing because it's all very wordy. And sometimes you have to kind of stop and say, like, wait, thou whilst? I don't even know what that word means. But once you get used to it, it's a good movie and it's really well shot. This is from a director named Ben Bigelow, who apparently had made a couple of short films. This is his first feature. Excuse me. So the whole concept of this is that it is a family of four traveling across the country in 1860. So it's mom, dad, who is a reverend, and then teenage daughter and teenage brother, and teenage brother is blind. And the whole reason that they're traveling is that dad wants to set up a church. And so they're traveling cross country by wagon, dragging an organ, because dad says that at some point he's going to find the right place. He's going to set up a church. He's going to start playing organ, and then the parishioners will find him. So they get to this place in the woods, super deep in the woods, nothing around for just days that they have not seen anybody. They decide to camp for the night, put their horses, tie their horses to trees. They get up in the morning, their horses are gone. And it's not even like the horses have just, ripped away from the trees and taken off. The ropes have been burned. So something like intentionally burned the horses and let them go. And so they're now stuck here because dad refuses to leave the wagon and the organ, and they're days away from everything. But suddenly they all start hearing this thing, these like crazy wailing sounds from the woods around them. And everybody is not sure what they're hearing. Mom and sister are immediately like, holy shit, it sounds like a monster. But dad immediately, the Reverend, perceives it as this is God and he's speaking to me. And not only that, he can translate it. He starts transcribing these messages from God that this supposed voice is giving him. And then as they stay there for a couple more days, the dad sees it very much as we have to stay here. This is the message. This is where I have to build my church. But in the meantime, sister and mom, who are a lot more skeptical, start having really creepy shit happen to them. And there's nothing there. Like they're in the woods with nothing. They run out of food. Their horses are gone. And this got really fucking creepy. Like at no point would I say it got, super scary. Oh my God. But there were just so many creepy moments in this. So 4 actors, well, a couple more people come in towards the end, but primarily 4 actors, 1 location, first time director. This is surprisingly great. So yeah, thine ears shall bleed. If you can get over the 1860s dialogue, you're good. It was a really cool concept, and it definitely kept itself moving and peppered some really creepy moments the whole way through. So if you're into something like The Wind, Eyes of Fire, this is definitely kind of in that same vein of like super period pioneer horror. Really good find. Thine ears shall bleed.
They all died 80 years ago.
That's what you're gonna think?
All right, so doing
Not
the math,
even
you're like
80.
1860. I'm like, oh well, they couldn't have lived past like 1920.
1940,
Right.
1920.
Yeah, it's a little disappointing. Hard to get over.
How do you do that? How do you do that?
I just count.
Like,
I count the years.
still...
Like I work out the difference between the 2 decades, and I just.
You're the type. But then, how do you watch something like Oppenheimer? Like when you already know the ending. Like how do you get through that movie? Because that's my hang up when I'm watching.
I think I'm only talking about horror films. I don't think I have that problem with other things because horror films are about life and death.
We need to describe this because we talked about this on our Patreon show. So Elric has this thing where he can't watch.
I can watch anything. Period. I can watch it. I just don't get very invested because all the people are already dead.
He can't get invested in period pieces, horror films, because he views it as all these people have already died. So what does it? So
it doesn't matter. So like, there's a slasher killing someone. I'm like, yeah, but that person would have died anyway by now. So it's just the dates thing. I don't know if it's that or the costuming, but something keeps me a little bit, not all, there's probably a couple, like The Witch I got invested in because of the filmmaking techniques, but a lot of the times I'm just held a little outside.
Now, does it work if it's like a horror film being made today, but it's set in the 1950s? I mean, do you still have that? Well, these people would be 90 now and they'd probably be dead. So what does it matter?
That's a good question. I think so. I think it's about like, seeing them in all these costumes and saying things like thine. I'm like, yeah, but if it's not hipster slang, I just can't get into it,
You
Bekah.
just
I just
can't
can't.
if it's not skibbity
Yeah,
riz
exactly.
and
See, if it's not
you
my
can't
salt
do
to
it.
take, I'm just not interested. My salt to take, it has to have that lingo.
Handing out nines and
Yeah,
ones because it's fang
yeah, but
time. And
it is a joke, but I do think that I've noticed that it does something that like is in the back of my head sometimes when I'm watching a tension-based film like that. Not, I don't think like if I'm watching Amadeus, it doesn't matter because yes, they're all dead, but they're creating something that will outlast them. Music, it's beautiful, so I give them a pass. But in a slasher, it's different.
but can you watch period pieces from the 1980s? Like, do you watch Eyes of Fire and still have that feeling?
A little bit, like even Eyes of Fire, which I really like. I don't really care about any of the people because they're dead.
Oh
Like
God.
it's cool when fireballs are being shot, but I'm not like worried about. I think what I'm really saying is like I'm not worried about the people because I know it's too late to worry. My tears will be wasted, and I need to hold some of them back for contemporary issues. That's what I think, Bekah.
Well, I'm going to still say for a period piece, really, this was a pretty cool one. And I found it to be a really cool concept. So, and it's a religious horror. So Elric's, kind of pessimism aside here, Thine Ears Shall Bleed, really cool Amazon find.
Yeah, I'm not judging that movie at all. I read a couple books. I want to hear cheering every
Yay.
time.
I got one more movie and then I have two.
All right, I'll do one book and then you do a movie and I'll do a book. I got two.
Okay.
I won't do these deep because they're. But I am up to. I feel really good because like last year, like I said, I probably only did like 7 books last year,
Ooh,
and that's what triggered me to. That's all right, and that's what triggered me
No,
to be
I've
like.
been muting myself throughout. I've been like catching myself on the mute, and that one I didn't get there in time. Go ahead.
But yeah, so I don't, and so I used Goodreads this year as we talked about, and I made my goal. I think I initially was going to be like 10 books or something, but I'm on 18 books now. I just finished my 18th book, and so
That's
I've
great.
re-leveled to 25 novels, all novels. So I'm gonna
Do
get
you
to
feel
25.
good?
Oh yeah, no,
though?
I mean what
Like,
I'm
is it
saying
making you feel good?
was about watching a few less movies. I'm still at 300 movies, so it's not like I'm going to be cutting my yearly movies by too much. But it really being intentional about reading is a game changer. Like game changer mentally, I think. For just and for creatively too. If you're someone who's wanting to write and stuff, reading has always been the best thing for writing, and so I've just found myself a lot more excited about ideas. So hey, thumbs up to reading. We love you, David Bowie and Yoda, our two gurus at reading. So one of the books I read is the 5th book by this writer I've read this year. So of those 18, 5 of them is Ronald Malfi, and this is his brand new one, and it was really great. Small town horror. Very different than his, not very, but quite different than the others I had read so far this year. My favorite is still the Come With Me. That's still my favorite book of his. But this one's very much like a King book. Like it has 5 childhood friends, Chesapeake Bay. They're all being slowly drawn back because of something.
One of my favorite settings.
Yeah, and it's a beautiful setting. And one of the things that one of them is feeling kind of a darkness around them, even though almost a dark entity that they can't place. And then it comes back to 20 years earlier where they've been involved in something unfortunate that happened, and something is going to get its revenge. And they get pulled deeper and deeper, but it has some very creepy description, very creepy the way the revenge is happening, because the revenge is like taking place in a supernatural way. It feels original on that level. And I love in its tagline, it says, maybe this is a ghost story, ... versus saying it is. Very interesting book, and I think pretty evocative. So I think for King fans, this would be a particularly high rec. I just gave my copy to our friend Dick, who's probably the biggest King fan we know, or one of them. And so we'll see what he says. But yeah, this was a really fun book. So that's Small Town Horror. And if you haven't read Ronald Malfi, like I said, 5 of his books this year so far, because they're just so freaking readable. Yeah, we've got to get him on. He would be, I would be very curious, because I saw on his Instagram he's like in rock bands too. So I was like, wow, how does this guy have the time?
Doesn't he live out near you? No, I'm confusing
No, that's
him
that
with
guy.
the...
The Brian Windsor guy or whatever his name is.
Yeah,
yeah.
I'm confusing him with that guy.
Yeah.
But yes,
No, I think this guy is
Ronald.
definitely probably near the Chesapeake. He's probably on that side of the coast. So,
well, then I have to talk to him, because that's like my neck of the woods. Okay, so now I'm reaching out to Ronald Malfi. You got it. I'm making notes while we do this.
I need to stop reading all his books, otherwise I'll have nothing to look forward to.
Oh, I got tons. Look, this is my to read shelf for those people not watching us on YouTube. You're missing out on this part. But then again, you've also missed out on the lovely visuals of me blowing my nose every 5 minutes. So consider yourself lucky. But behind me here, I have my 2 bookshelves that are my to read shelf. And as Elric can see, I have shit packed right now. Like it is so stacked up. So Elric, let me know when you need a couple more things and I'll pass you some things.
Yeah. No, I've got something good to read on this trip that Southern Gothic one that from the past that I hadn't heard of. And that's something I'm always, I think one of my dreams is to make a Southern Gothic film. So it's like, I've got to start reading good Southern Gothic literature.
I just purchased episode 13 by Craig DeLuey to read on the
Okay.
flight. And so now I'm going to read
In bed.
that in bed after my Sudafed and steroids wear off and I crash. So that's where I'm headed
Wait,
in about an
does this
hour.
mean I'm going to have like an empty seat next to me now, or will it be?
Oh, dude, you get maybe. I don't know. They sometimes fill
Yeah, they
them.
probably will.
So yeah, you might get, an empty seat and then you can
Yeah,
like prop up your feet and spread out.
but it won't be
Yeah.
the same as playing trivia on the
I know.
little
Oh,
computer with you. With you,
that's the best part.
yeah,
Usually when we're on long flights, Elric and I, we get cutthroat at any type of trivia
yeah.
game provided by the airport or the airline on the back of the seats. Any of those games, we go for trivia, but any of the games we'll get
Yeah, they're
cutthroat
fun.
on.
Yeah.
So yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna take us back to one of the last movie that I have for the week, and then I have two comic or graphic novels to talk about. So watch a lot of shark films. You know that. And hey, Shark Week just coming up. But I watch a lot of shark films in general. And I got to be honest, most of them I do not talk about on the show. Because as Elric mentioned before, we kind of say, like, we want to talk about stuff that we can positively celebrate. And if I watch a shark movie, it's a very kind of ephemeral thing where I'm like, yay, a shark. But if at the end of the day, I can't discuss it for, at least 4 minutes and talk about its merits, then a lot of times I just don't mention it on the show. But that doesn't mean that I'm not enjoying them. It just means that I'm not going to burden our listeners with every shark film I watch, especially when some really only appeal to me. So I go into a lot of shark movies with that attitude. I have a very mixed relationship with them. In that kind of, I love them and I watch every single one of them, but because I watch so many, I honestly don't expect a lot. Like most of them, I go in expecting kind of sci-fi grade. I expect stock characters. I expect stock footage. I expect stock plots. So when I find one that kind of breaks that and makes me say, this is actually really fucking good, I have to talk about it on the show. And so this week I watched The Last Breath, which is a new one just coming to theaters from RLJE. It hits theaters on July 27th, 26th, and 26th. And I think on that same day it goes to streaming platforms. So this was not perfect, but it was surprisingly fun. So if you are in any capacity a shark movie fan, this has some good stuff in it. The concept is that this group of old college friends, that they've kind of split up. Most of them still live in New York City. They still hang out. They still see each other all the time. But one of them had basically kind of a crisis when he started his kind of adult job, quit everything, broke up with his girlfriend, and moved to the Caribbean to give boat tours. And he's now a boat tour assistant. And they do shark dives and they do wreck dives in the Caribbean. Well, he has convinced all of his college friends to come down and stay on his island in the Caribbean and go scuba diving on this tour that he works for. Now, the guy who runs the company is Julian Sands,
Yeah.
which I did not know when I started watching. This is Julian Sands' last
Oh.
movie. And what's great, he's really good in this. He plays an old, salty boat dive expert who's too old to keep diving. And his hands are too arthritic, so he knits all the time to keep his hands moving. But he just sits on the deck and tells old salt stories, and he's really fun in it. And it was just endearing to see him in this and to see, kind of his last movie before his untimely demise. So yeah. But the whole setup of this is that the main guy who has just discovered this lost wreck that was thought lost forever, this ship called the Charlotte, that's a World War II battleship. And he finds it and he tells his friends when they get to the island, like, holy shit, we just found the Charlotte. You can't tell anybody. This is going to be a news frenzy. And one of his friends, who is incredibly wealthy, says, I will give you $50,000 if we can go tour that wreck right now. And Julian Sands and him are like, the business is about to go bankrupt. Let's do this. And we'll take them down and let them tour this old World War II wreck at the bottom of the ocean. And so they do. And so they're taking a group of inexperienced divers down to tour this boat that's been, completely there for decades. It seems to be in pristine condition. But once they get there, they get trapped inside of the ship with sharks. And so, like 70% of this movie takes place underwater, which is so baller with these. I've used that word so much tonight, but that's been kind of a lot of the films that I watched this week where they all had elements that I was impressed by. So yeah, then they get trapped in there with sharks, which was really fun. It does not skimp on the sharks either, which I will say, that there was another two movies that I watched this week that were new shark releases where, the sharks show up at like the 60-minute mark and then they're done by the 80-minute mark. And I was like, why is this marketed as a shark film? This does not skimp on the sharks. And sometimes they look great, sometimes they don't. You're still getting CG sharks, so it's kind of hit or miss. But, that said, if a CG shark is like two of them are ripping a body in half, I'm going to cheer, regardless of kind of the quality of the CG shark. So don't go in necessarily expecting it to look quite as brilliant as the Meg. We are, I assume, working on a slightly lower budget than the Meg. But that said, the kills were really fun and this had some really good shark jump scares and the setting was really cool. So it's not Jaws, but still, for people like me who really love shark movies, this had some good stuff in it. So this is called The Last Breath, shark movie from RLJE.
All right. Yeah, because there's a few recently that all, and the titles were all kind of similar, so I kind of got lost on them.
Yeah. So I watched a lot of them. It was cool because they were timing them with Shark Week, which is great because I watch parts of Shark Week as well. Every summer, that's kind of like my thing. So yeah, they were timing it with that, but some of them were not as good. Whereas this one I found to have some really good stuff in it. So not perfect, kind of fun though.
Real quick, my other book, I won't say much about it because it's quite a complex, dense book. This is a book called Ill Will by Dan Cheon, and this was recommended a few weeks ago. Daniel Kraus on X. Wow, that's the first time I've said that and not said Twitter
Oh my
first.
God,
I'm
nobody
pretty
calls
proud.
it
I'm pretty
X.
proud of that. That was very, very now. He had posted Book of the Year. He was just like Book of the Year, calling it. This is incredible. So I was like, all right, just ordered it on Amazon.
What's it
It's
called?
called
Ill
Ill
Will?
Will. It's
Doing it up
is
right
it
now.
horror? Is it? It's definitely, reviewers will call it horror, but it's lots going on in this book. Definitely a lot of true crime type, or not true crime, but crime type stuff. So what's so impressive about it is just his writing style. He wrote a book of shorts, horror stories called Stay Awake, which I bought a couple years ago and I really liked, but I wouldn't have thought from that he would be capable of this kind of a novel. This is like you're following basically a psychiatrist whose family is kind of falling apart because his wife died. Is one story. When he was a kid, his family were his parents and uncle and aunt were all shot, and it was kind of mysterious what happened. He had blamed it on his slightly older adopted brother who had been in jail for 20 years. So that's the past. In the present, a bunch of young, college age boys are being drowned by what somebody is calling a serial killer, but no one knows if there's a pattern, and no one really looks into it because they're guys, and looks like just accidents. So people are like, well, no one really cares. That's the present, and it's basically this book that's taking place between these two, like constantly flipping back and forth between times. Between character narrators, so sometimes it's him, sometimes it's his son, sometimes it's the guy his testimony ended up putting in jail for the murder of his parent, and you're just constantly like, it's entertaining and well written, not necessarily tense for most of it, and then you get to like the last 20 pages and it's like it all catches up to you and suddenly it's incredibly tense for the very ending of this book, because it's kind of like virtuoso writing, like kind of one of those books where you're like, wow, it took me a bit longer than I've been kind of blowing through books usually in like, a week if I'm really into it. And this was like, 2.5, 3 week read just because of the kind of book, but it is really freaking good. And so he has one called Send Reply or something, or I'll Await Your Reply, that a lot of people say is brilliant. So I'm going to look that one up next. But I've already thanked Dan. I wrote to him to thank him because he wasn't recommending it to me directly. It was just the world, but he was correct. I think this is Book of the Year so far of the 18 I've read.
That's bold.
Yeah.
Okay.
Especially in terms of writing. Like a couple of the plots, like I think the Malfi plot to the Come With Me was probably my favorite read, but there's something about this where you're just like, this guy is writing a storm. It's really cool. So Ill Will, look for it. And follow us on Goodreads, not because we need follow. It's just a good place to get book recs if you want to hear.
That's my favorite thing to do. Even the Goodreads like lists that they make, like where every couple of months they'll do like best horror movies that have released, or sorry, best horror books from the last month. And that's where I'm finding everything, because I'm not as in the know with the horror books as I am with the horror movies, where I get every press release, so I know everything that's coming.
Stay on top of it.
With the books, yeah, I can't track. And there's a lot of indie companies that I'm now like Tenebrous Press. I'm super into Cemetery Dance. I've been checking out all of their stuff. So I'm just starting to really get a move into that. I love that somebody had posted on our Twitter, I will never call it that, X, a couple of weeks ago, that we were like slowly becoming a low-key horror book podcast. I'll take that.
Yeah, it's probably just
I'll take that.
We'll see. It'll be nice. It's nice to keep it like
horror books, they're really having a moment. I mean, you and I have been doing this for 12 years now. And I have to say, prior to this, I would have read a book like once, maybe 3 a year max. I would read a book. But there has been just so much good stuff, really just shepherded by like Paul Tremblay, Grady Hendrix, Stephen Graham Jones, Daniel Krauss, starting about 4 years ago. And then just this wave that followed it. I mean, I want to be a part of it. I want to read everything that's coming. So yeah. So with that, I did not read a novel this week because I'm in the middle of about 3. But what I did read this week was 2 really cool graphic novels that I wanted to mention. So the first one, remember last week I talked about The Nasty by Jonathan Lees. So this week I read one of his other stories, Hotel by John Lees. And this one's from AWA. This is from a couple of years ago. But it's an anthological one. So every issue is kind of about a different hotel room, but they're all really fucked up. So it's this desert hotel. It's like a super deserty, like 29 Palms hotel, like Joshua Tree style, but every single room has this really dark story behind it, and they interconnect. Like it goes like full trick or treat style storytelling, where characters from this one will pass through this other story, but then you'll get their story later. So it's really cool the way that it intertwined all of them. So it feels kind of like, remember the Tarantino film from like mid-90s, Four Rooms?
Yeah.
It's like that in a desert motel, if every single story was like super fucked up. Like it gets supernatural in some of them are more kind of murder or slasher based. Like this was fun. There is a second volume that I have sitting back there on my to read shelf. I liked it so much. I'm ready to dive into the second. So that was a really cool find. This one just got released in a volume format. This is The Devil That Wears My Face. You can see I checked it out of the Burbank Library. It's on a new 14-day loan, so I had to read it really fast. But The Devil That Wears My Face, this is from Mad Cave. I prefer to read things in volume form when it goes to graphic novel. Some of comics I will read issue to issue. Like I still have my mailbox and everything that I hold at the comic book store, and there's a couple of comics that I will read issue to issue. But because I'm so compulsive about, like, I will sit down and read for an hour, I want to read complete stories. Like I love the idea of I'm going to read like 6 issues in a row, and I can't always do that if I'm going issue to issue. So for a lot of comics, I'll wait until they do the bound graphic novel volume. So I did that for The Devil That Wears My Face. So this one's from Mad Cave. This was really, really cool. It's a period piece. So Elric's not going to get it because he's going to think that everybody's already dead.
It's fine when I'm reading.
Oh, you can do it when you read.
Yeah.
When you read, it doesn't matter.
It's fine. Reading's fine.
So I think this one's 1700s.
Because Bekah, when I'm reading it, I know they never lived.
Oh my
so I'm
God.
totally fine with that. It's like, oh, these are made up characters. It's not even real. I'm good.
I love glass half empty, half full. Well, I'm going to die of dehydration in 3 days anyway, so what the fuck does it matter?
Exactly.
So 1700s, there is this priest who is having this super bad crisis of faith, but he is a really good exorcist. And so the Vatican calls him up and they're like, you, Father Beery, we need you to go to Spain because there's this like super wealthy nobleman whose son is completely possessed by a demon, and we need you to go do the exorcism. So he hops on a boat and heads to Spain. He gets there, and son is like not only super possessed, but it's like this crazy strong demon. He has like killed 4 priests already. He's ripping people in half. Super fucking violent and brutal, this demon. And so Fury starts doing his thing. And what happens? The demon jumps into his body and he jumps into the body that the demon was holding. And so they basically switch places. And then the demon, now in his priest body, with everybody knowing him as a priest, takes off. And so then it becomes this act of him trying to get back to his body, but this incredibly tense demon named Legion has it and is now kind of like headed towards the Vatican with it. And so this was fun, fucking brutal. Like there was barely 2 pages you would go without some type of intense bloodshed. So it was like Face Off kind of, but exorcism style in the 1700s with a lot of body ripping. So yeah, really fun read. The Devil That Wears My Face.
All
okay.
Right. And what about I believe you're watching something on Night Flight.
Yeah, so let's talk about, actually, you're going to talk about it too. I'm going to shock you with this one because I know you love this film just as much as me. So for my Night Flight pick of the week, I was thinking about doing Angel 1 and 2 because they're both on Night Flight, and that's what I watched for our last show when we were talking about Maxine. But for my Night Flight pick of the week this week, I selected Torso from Sergio Martino, which I know is one of your faves as well.
And we watched it on the big screen together not too long ago at the New Beverly, and it was great Hitchcockian sequence. Like it's one of those movies that's kind of, sometimes it's a little drifty in the hippie stuff and the motorbikes and new people having orgies, and you're like, oh, this is interesting. But when it gets to the part where it's like, oh, there's a key and there's a door and the killer's coming, that stuff's great.
This is your personality. Nude people having orgies. It's interesting. Oh, but there's a killer and a key.
There's a key and I don't know what's going to happen. Well, with an orgy, I know what's going to happen. I don't know what happens with the key.
I already know the end game.
And if a key leads to an orgy, even better.
And it's 1983. They're probably all dead.
No, some could still be alive. I hold out hope. I always give a sliver of hope.
A sliver of hope there. So Torso, just epic giallo film, beautifully shot. The setup is that this killer comes to a college campus and is killing a lot of the girls there. And so a group of girls decide to pack up, leave the college campus and head to this vacation house, but the killer follows them there. And then one of them breaks her ankle and is now stuck inside the house. So this gets tense. Elric's right. It has this amazing Hitchcockian moment. Beautifully shot. I just absolutely love this film so much. So it is 1973 and just Sergio. When we saw this, I don't even know if you remember, this was our first movie back after COVID.
Oh, yeah.
Because I remember wearing a mask the whole time, which I clearly still need to be doing. Like, why the fuck do I go to the grocery? I should send my kids to camp with masks on because this is the result of it. But yeah, this was right when we got back from COVID. New Bev did a Sergio Martino triple feature. And I can't remember what other 2 movies we saw.
I don't know if it was triple or double. And you're right. I'm kind of blanking on what.
I can't remember the second.
It'll come back to us.
But we watched Torso, so that was like the crown jewel there. But yeah, so this is currently streaming on Night Flight. And so Night Flight has always been a rite of passage, a trip of counterculture discovery, old and new. The iconic 80s series is back as Night Flight Plus, a streaming service available on all major devices, including Roku, Apple TV, Amazon Fire TV, and mobile devices like iOS and Android, Chromecast, and AirPlay also available. With an all-access membership to Night Flight, explore the exclusive home of the original episodes of Night Flight and hundreds of music documentaries, horror films, cult classics, and more lost TV treasures. Are you a pop culture obsessed weirdo? Try Night Flight, raves the New York Times. For this week, Night Flight and Fangoria have partnered for an exclusive bundle. For just $79.99, you get a full year of both Fangoria and Night Flight. So head over to fangoria.com/nightflight to take advantage of this limited time offer. Colors of the Dark listeners can use the discount code COLORS24 to save 25% on an annual Night Flight Plus membership. That's less than $3.17 a month. So head over to nightflightplus.com/sign up now and enter the code COTD at checkout. Again, that's COTD. So please check out Night Flight. It's definitely a memory of my childhood, and I am so excited to be sharing it with everybody else. Okay, so let's take a break, and then we'll come back, and I think we're going to dig into some serial killers.
All right, welcome back. Now we are turning our attention to serial killer films. One of my favorite. It's one of those subgenres of film in general, not just horror films or thrillers, mysteries, whatever it is that I tend to have seen almost all of them because in college I was kind of obsessed by this stuff and read Mindhunter and decided to take criminology. So this is
I was going
close
to
to my
say,
heart.
weren't you a criminology
But
student?
because of these movies, it wasn't because of wanting.
Oh,
It's not
wow.
because of anything real. It's mostly because of the trailer to Body Parts, as we've discussed. I saw the trailer to Body Parts and wanted to be a criminologist. Then I studied it, and then I watched a lot of movies. And then when I started studying it, I got to a point where I was like, "Oh, the reality of this and the real study of the real people is so freaking depressing." That it eventually, by the end, I was like, yeah, I think I'd rather make movies than actually be in the room with some of these people that I was excited to study. Because I'm excited about the
I,
cinematic version, not the real sociopath.
I love that the film to drive you to study criminology was not something like Silence of the
No,
Lambs or Psycho or any of the great kind of psychological serial killer study movies. It was Body
no.
Parts.
It was the trailer to Body Parts. Body Parts, yes, it sealed the deal when I finally started. But the trailer I must have seen 100 times before I saw the film, and I'd always be so like, "Ooh, what's his job?" And he's a criminologist. I'm like, I want to be that. So I was that guy, and I still maintain my love of that film, as you know. So anyway, but what's cool about serial killer movies or serial killer, and some of these are spree killers or whatever you want to call them. Sometimes I'll listen to people do podcasts on this, and I want to interject to be like, actually, that's not a serial killer that you're talking about. Even some of the more famous ones in movies and literature are often just like, somebody who went psycho once or, whatever. They're not necessarily a pattern to their killings. But what we liked, one of the interesting things about Longlegs, a lot of shows since have been doing, here's the canon, like The Big Picture did. What are the top 10, movies about serial killers? And the fact is that what Oz did, that is most genius about this movie. Honestly, I think the smartest thing about it, and it was very intentional, is he literally just wants you to sit down and go, oh, it's just Silence the Lambs. Like he's not trying to hide, he's literally doing it on purpose because he's like, then you will be comfortable because it's a movie you like and already kind of know how it goes. So it's a young female agent over her head in a first big case. That's probably like he said, literally, I just did that because I love Silence of the Lambs and thought that will get
Mhm.
people to feel comfortable. And then I can get super fucking weird. And so I really love that. So, Manhunter's a favorite. So we're excluding Thomas Harris work. We're excluding Zodiac and,
We said no
Seven. Anything
seven.
that if I said it out loud, you say that's the obvious canon top 20 of those kind of things. Again, if one of us picks one that's on the edge, whatever. It's not for that reason. It's just the kind of and I looked at certain things that I had like reminded me of certain elements of Longlegs. So I'll link occasionally back, but I just think Longlegs had so many fun, interesting atmospheric angles that some of these movies have had. So some of them I'd be curious to know if he was influenced. But we'll get into it as we talk. But I
Mhm.
assume you also were somebody who, because you like procedural, you like mystery.
I love
Yeah.
procedurals, yeah, and the mysteries. So I was a big Law and Order
Uh-huh.
fan. Still am. Like I will still sit down and be like, well, I haven't watched the 27th season of SVU. I'll totally just catch
Yeah.
up and like binge watch. I will follow Olivia Benson till my death. So yeah, I have always been a big procedural, but I grew up with that because my mom was big into like Perry
Yeah.
Mason and Matlock was on continuously, and like there was just a bunch of like Falcon and Snowman, like a bunch of these kind of procedural murder mystery. Murder She Wrote was a big one in my house that I watched growing up. And so it was one of those things that I always sat down and watched with my mom because she would always watch a murder mystery. And then by the time that we get into the 90s, into the 2000s, there was such a surplus of them that it became something that my mom and I would always watch together. So by the time we're getting into some of those like sleazier murder mysteries in the late 90s, I was old enough at that time. Like by that time I was, coming into my teen years that mom would be like, yeah, fine, let's watch this. So Silence of the Lambs was definitely like what would that have been like
Yeah, I,
sophomore
I
year.
think we were like
Um
13 or something, right? 12, 13, probably.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and watching that like with my mom just kind of cemented this love. So yeah, and I still will watch like Monk, one of my favorite shows ever. Like I still love those procedural murder mysteries. I want to make one. Like I just love them so much. I love those the procedural TV shows. But these serial killer movies, I loved watching the biggest hits in the 90s into the 2000s. What has been really fun as of late is circling back and seeing some of the ones that I did not see that I didn't even know existed because there was such a
Oh
surplus.
yeah.
Like there was one I was searching for today that I had watched for deep cuts last year that I was never even able to find the title of. So I'm going to have to put that at the end so that
Hmm.
you can tell me what the title was because I was Googling every fact I could
Hmm.
remember about the plot and never could find it. But that has been kind of one of the most fun things that we have done over the past couple of years and on our Patreon show is circling back to some of these like super deep cut murder mysteries that were hitting in the 2000
Oh
aughts.
yeah, yeah. So this should be fun. So we're obviously like normal. We're trying to pick a mixture of like more deep cutter ones or things that we just particularly dig. So do you want to lead us off?
Yeah, I am going to kick us off with 1995 because this is one that I think is criminally underseen, and that is Copycat with Sigourney Weaver.
Yeah, I feel like it's come up
This,
a bit from you lately, and I've been actually it's been exciting me to rewatch every time you talk
yeah.
about it because I only saw it the one time in the theater.
So this came out in 1995 right after 7. Like it was literally just a couple of months after 7. And it got buried because all anybody was talking about was 7. And so it got kind of buried. And then other places referred to it as like a 7 ripoff. And it is so not that. It is Sigourney Weaver as a psychologist. She's like an agoraphobe. She's a psychologist and she has this really bad experience in the cold open that with a killer that makes her agoraphobic. So she's scared to leave her house. But that said, years later, she's kind of gotten out of the game. She's still scared to leave her apartment. Cops circle back to her because a serial killer that she had worked with back during her heyday seems to be killing again. But this person is copying a variety of serial killers from the past. So they can't nail down who this serial killer is because all he is doing is copying other serial killers' MOs. And they need her to help. It's Holly Hunter. She is amazing in this movie. Really great character. And Sigourney Weaver is playing this agoraphobic who is kind of forced to eventually leave. And yeah, so this is great. This was so underseen and it is just such a damn good movie. So that's where I wanted to kick us
Are,
off. Copycat
are
1995.
there any musicians in it?
I think there are. I think Harry Connick Jr. That's not. He's a serial
Yeah, yeah.
killer. He
But he's also
is.
a kind of a redneck or kind of
Yeah.
yeah. It's pretty great casting.
It's not, that's not a spoiler
No,
because it's in the
no.
cold open. He's a very famous serial killer that she has had run-ins with before. And so he becomes like her Hannibal
Yeah.
Lecter. And so, yeah, he is great in this movie,
I
though.
might even watch that one tonight. It's just every time you talk
So
about it, I'm like,
fucking good.
and I was thinking about why serial killer films have so many of them and why they keep getting made. And I was like, oh, you know what? It's kind of like your love of shark movies. They're similar.
Yeah.
A shark and a serial killer, there's something similar because you can't possibly really understand them, and they're
Yep.
forever interesting, and you're fucked when they lock onto you, basically.
Yep.
Um, okay, so one that is canon, and I won't be talking about, but it's one of the best in canon, and I think it has a lot of the vibes. Cruising by Friedkin. I think it has some of
Mm-hmm.
the dark magic vibes of that movie especially when the killer's meeting people in parks. I do think kind of is in the DNA of Longlegs, especially when it's an unseen killing and they change the actor who plays it. They just do things to keep you off your footing. So, but not picking Cruising, I'm picking a film that I loved a lot on VHS when I was a lot younger, by Friedkin, called Rampage. And this film,
Mm-hmm.
criminally underseen because it didn't, when it first got made, it was released like 8 years later because of a De Laurentiis company going under, and then kind of just got shoved onto VHS, which is where I saw it. And it's really hard. The parts that go hard are some of the hardest stuff in any other Friedkin film. And then other parts, the rest of the film is basically a legal drama, which is interesting, mostly on a philosophical level about the death penalty and stuff. But the parts that go hard, I think, are some of the best serial killer scenes ever photographed. It's actually based on, I would call this guy a spree killer more than a serial killer, but he has a lot of the same trappings, and he's obsessed. He has like satanic imagery and stuff that in his basement, and he's killing animals and stuff. But based on true story, this guy Richard Chase was called the Vampire Killer, and he killed 6 people in 4 days in '78. And he seems like just a normal teenage or late teen, maybe early 20s kind of dude. cool red jacket, cool sunglasses, walking down the street, and just literally will pick a house at random, walk inside, and murder you. And at this point, he breaks into a family's house at Christmas. So it's also a Christmas movie. Christmas people, pay attention. It's a Christmas movie.
Sounds super festive.
And he doesn't only kill them, but when they come upstairs to see what he's doing, he is drinking the blood of one of them, the child, and he's covered in the blood. And it's a very disturbing. I remember the image from like when I first saw it on VHS. It's so kind of horrific. And the reason I think it's so horrific is because then Michael Biehn is the DA, and he's kind of a liberal, so he's kind of against death penalty. But then his feelings are pushed in this case because the guy actually escapes one time from custody and kills again. And so then he has to decide, oh, am I actually shifting how I feel? Would I actually rather see this guy killed? So it's actually a film about things like quite deep concepts in the legal system. But the sequences, and one sequence where the killer smashes through a church window to kill a priest, it's really quite harrowing. But the serial killer scenes in this movie, and it finally, even when I was covering it like a year ago when Friedkin died for Pure Cinema, I still could only find like a YouTube type version. And then I think just in the last few weeks, maybe a couple months, I think it finally got a proper release. So like a proper HD release on Amazon and a disc. So definitely the time to check this one out, especially if you love cruising and you think cruising is great. This is him in the same mode. And there's just some very, very graphic stuff that feels close to what it might be to discover something as awful as this in a movie. But it's also entertaining, and Michael Biehn's great in it. So that's Rampage.
Okay, so let me take us to my number two, which gosh, it's been a long time since I've talked about this one, but as I was watching or revisiting all of these today, I was just like, God, I just love this movie. And it had such a bad release, which I'll talk about, and that is All the Boys Love Mandy Lane. So All the Boys Love Mandy Lane. This is Jonathan Levine back in 2006. This is, I think, his first film. And this was super small. You can tell this was made like indie on a shoestring budget. And it is a group of people who go away. They're teens, like high school students, go away for the weekend to one of their family's vacation house. So a group of teens there. And you really quickly realize that all of the boys there have this massive crush on one of the girls, Amber Heard, played by Amber Heard, who is Mandy Lane. And even she's supposed to be 16 and that she is still just drop dead gorgeous and very kind of natural in this movie because she does not have interest in any of them. Like that's kind of the terror for part of it is this girl who could give a fuck about any of these guys. She just wants to be friends with them all, but they are all pursuing her so hard that it's impossible for her to have normal interactions with any of them. And so you think that that's kind of the focus of the film, but then they start dying and she is completely flummoxed by what's going on. And it's all about kind of her and how everything seems to be pulling towards her because of how beautiful she is, but she doesn't like that. So it's wild. And this had one of the best twists that I had seen in a long time when I saw it that year. The reason that this did not get, and so you basically realize that there is like, it's set up kind of like a slasher, but it becomes more like a serial killer that is kind of involved in this whole thing, which I won't discuss without giving it away, but I'll just say it goes kind of serial killery. And so when this was released, it was made in 2006, but the company that made it, like Senator Entertainment, I think their name was, went bankrupt. And so it sat in legal court proceedings until 2013, where somebody purchased it and finally released it. And when they did, it did not get much fanfare. Like it definitely did like a straight to DVD release in 2013. Which is really sad considering it had been sitting there for almost 6 years waiting to get a release at that point. Like Amber Heard had long made Drive Angry and a number of other films. Jonathan Levine had already made Warm Bodies by this point. So it just sat there and it's a really tight movie. So definitely go back, watch All the Boys Love Mandy Lane.
Yeah, she's really good in that film. Okay, so another one I hadn't seen since VHS in my first year of college. My friend James, I remember him showing me this movie, and it's just called Cop, which is a very generic title, especially when the book it's based on has such a great fucking name. Blood on the Moon is the book.
That is a good
And it's a
name.
James Elroy book, and it's one of the ones that he even struggled to get published because of how hard it goes. And so this is James Elroy co-wrote the screenplay adaptation for James B. Harris. James B. Harris was the longtime producer for Kubrick, who started directing films in the 80s. He kind of came over and started making movies at that point. He made a couple good ones with James Woods. James Woods, whilst I don't like him now, I will die on the hill that he might be the best actor of the 80s. I think he is
Oh God, that
utterly
makes me throw up in my
he is
mouth, but it's
on
true.
fire in the 80s because he is playing also a kind of he almost now represents the decade for me because of the kind of there's a sleazy quality, there's a fast talking, he always feels a little coked up. There's a great film about him on coke, about coke addiction, which he's just one of the best performances of the 80s. But this is him. Here's a stat which I thought was, and I could feel it, but it wasn't until I looked up the trivia on the movie. He's in every shot of the movie. There's not a shot. I mean, and when I say shots, are rather scene, because I'm sure there's cutaways. But this is not a movie where you then cut to a subplot. He is the movie, so you're watching it through the cop's perspective. He is playing, as you would expect, a kind of cop that you can only kind of empathize with, and you're also judging the entire time. This is very much set in the Vice kind of world that we were watching with the movies we talked about a couple weeks ago. It's set in the Hollywood area. He's just a regular cop. He gets some call in saying that some guy who was trying to do some sort of break-in looked in a window and saw what he thinks is murder. He goes to it by himself. And then when he walks in, it's a very shocking image. He walks into the kitchen, and this blonde woman is hung upside down. So she's hanging from the ceiling, completely bloodied, and it's just like blood-splattered hair hanging above him. It's just an image where you're like, oh, Christ. Like, and he walks in and he has a real reaction to it, has to sit down. But then he's also like, I want this case. I want this because there might be a pattern, and he just wants to go kind of level up because he's in half the movie's him trying to like meet hookers and do things behind his family's back. His family life is terrible. He's like totally ruining everything. His buddy is Charles Durning, who's always fun as a friend cop. So he starts basically seeing that there's these unsolved murders that have similar patterns, being that they often have these books of poetry and feminist literature and stuff around. And he basically traces it to a character played by Leslie Ann Warren, who's just the greatest. Everyone loves Leslie Ann Warren.
From Clue,
from Clue.
love
Everyone
her.
loves Leslie, and she's real weird in this. And she's basically runs a feminist bookstore. And he's like, it's just already funny because when he walks in, he is like the epitome of why she has probably started this bookstore to avoid guys like James Woods. And it's pretty funny. And there's a scene that made me laugh out loud where it's just a close up on him as she's recounting this very traumatic past. And there's a part where his eyes are looking down at his watch, and it is like, I don't think I noticed it last time, but it was one of the funniest things I've ever seen in a movie because it's so true to the fucking awful person that this guy is, the way he's listening to her through her pain. Anyway, through her, he starts to see a pattern that somebody is actually, who is kind of obsessed with her all these years since high school, has been making these murders. He doesn't know who it is or why, but and it all kind of culminates in this amazing sequence in their old high school like gym. And it's fucking great. It's one of those really entertaining, like really surprising cop thrillers. But once you get to who the killer is, it's actually kind of disturbing and obsessive. Really underrated movie. Again, I watched it. I don't know if there's a Blu-ray. Maybe there is, but on Amazon there was a nice looking version to buy. So do recommend this for people. And as long as you're not James Woods now, I'm not interested. James Woods 80s, all in.
All in.
All in.
All in.
Videodrome James, come on.
Videodrome James
is all good.
And
even that, he's kind of unlikable.
really
I mean, that's the thing. He's the best at being unlikable, but in a way that you like to watch, which is key.
Okay, so heading into my number, this is 4, right?
I think you're on 3.
4.
You're on 3.
Am I?
Because you did All the Boys Love Mandy Lane and one other one at the start.
You're right. I did. Okay. So heading into 3, I am going to do Mr. Brooks from 2007.
Nice surprise.
This is one that a lot of people do not know about, which is why I wanted to put it on this list, because anytime I can get people to watch Mr. Brooks is kind of a good day. This is Kevin Costner as a serial killer. Kevin Costner plays a businessman who has this kind of side. He's very normal businessman. He has a family at home, but he is also a serial killer. And so he has a daughter, I think it's Danielle Pennebaker, if memory serves.
I think you're right. Yeah, I think it's one of the first things.
So the cast in this is amazing. It's Kevin Costner is the serial killer. He has married to Demi Moore, if memory serves. It's been a
I
while
remember
since I've
that.
watched this, but Demi Moore is in this. And then he's got a full family. Then one day somebody sees him committing a crime, and it's Dane Cook. And Dane Cook starts blackmailing him to become his protege. So he has to start teaching Dane Cook how to become a serial killer that doesn't get caught. This is surprisingly great. I remember owning this on DVD, and when I saw it back in 2007, I thought it was super tight. And then it never got much love then. It just kind of fell off the face of the earth. The director hadn't done much, but he was really well known for his writing. A guy named Bruce Evans. He wrote the script for the screenplay for Stand By Me. He wrote the screenplay for Starman. He'd done a decent amount of stuff. This was one of just a handful of films that he did the screenplay and directed. But yeah, it's a tight little serial killer movie. It's not exactly like in the serial killer vein where you're like finding clues and following the criminologist as they try to figure out who the killer is. You know who the killer is. It's kind of Henry Portrait in that style, but it's a lot more. Whereas Henry Portrait is like super bleak and dark, and you can watch that once. And I don't know if it's the one that you like watch over and over. Maybe it is for some people, but Mr. Brooks is
Shout out
fun.
Heather Buckley.
Heather
Who
Buckley,
probably, I think it's
watch
one of her
it.
favorite movies.
Henry Portrait of Serial Killer over and over. It's like popcorn movie
Yeah,
all the way.
that's fun.
No, this is like a fun little serial killer movie.
Yeah, no, this I didn't see this one when it came out. I saw it a few years ago. There was this and another horror one where the daughter or something is called his daughter. It's something daughter, last daughter, first daughter, and it's Kevin Costner and his daughter. And there's a weird mound in the backyard and creature coming out of it. Like there's two made around the same time, and I was like, man,
I don't remember that
yeah, you
one.
might dig it. And both were really good. Like I was like, wow. So Costner, I think there's periods with Costner like seems like he disappears, but he was making movies, and then you go back to them, and you're like, oh yeah, he's really good in everything.
Demi Moore is the detective in this.
Oh,
Okay, can you
interesting.
tell I haven't watched it in 10
Yeah,
years?
it's
Demi, I knew she was in this, but yeah, she's the detective who's chasing him in this. But yeah, so it's super fun though.
yeah. The next one I haven't seen since it came out in '99. Another one that I think some of the but kind of just vibes. Felicia's Journey, which is not a horror director, Adam McGoyan at all, definitely more art house. But this movie really gets under your skin. And I think it's really topical now. I feel like it's a movie that really suits now, given women's rights to their own choice and freedom of choice are kind of under attack. And obviously, if you grew up in Ireland in a certain period, you absolutely could never get an abortion. So it's a young girl has basically been impregnated by her boyfriend who acts like he's going to come back and send for her, but he's not, and he's just taking off. He goes to London or to England to work, and she never sees from him again, and she's worried about what to do. And so she kind of goes on her own, and she's definitely too young to probably be doing this, and definitely innocent minded. Goes to England, and thinks he's working at a lawnmower factory, and as she's leaving, doesn't find him. Bob Hoskins pulls over and says, can I help you out? And he's the seemingly, I mean, except if you've seen a movie before, he's not a nice guy, but he definitely seems like he's being giving her care. This is set in the '70s, and she ends up going back to his house, and he's trying to help her track the guy and figure out what it is. And as she's there, we start to see the main plot of kind of subplot and back flashbacks of the story where he's Bob Hoskins is basically obsessed. He's a bit of a gourmand and can cook, and he's obsessed by these old videos because his mother had a cooking show, and he was like this little chubby boy in all the videos that she'd always be kind of cruel to, and he's always watching these cooking videos, and we start to realize that he also is a guy who has many probably beings buried in his backyard, and anything he's doing to help her is probably gonna not end up going well. And it's actually one of the best. I'd say if somebody said like best serial killer performances, I'd put this in the top couple with Hannibal Lecter. I mean, I think Hoskins is already a great actor. In this, it's a very interesting character. Like there's a lot because he genuinely also seems caring and like he actually wants to help her, but there's this darkness that you're getting from his past, and just some of the weird vibes of this movie. It's never like exciting, I would say, in terms of the pacing. It's not that kind of movie, but it is. I think it's really beautifully made, and maybe still under people's radar who wouldn't normally watch a movie like this. I think because of the dark subject matter, they would probably quite enjoy it. So that is Felicia's Journey from '99, and Bob Hoskins as Hilditch, a very disturbing character. And still no Blu-ray as far as no. There, I think this one did get a Blu-ray.
Sorry, I had muted myself for
Oh,
coughing and then forgot to turn it back off. And so
which
I was
is great
talking about how
podcasting.
it was great podcasting. So I've never seen this.
Oh, interesting. I think
I've never even heard of this
Oh,
film, to
okay.
be
I think you
honest.
would definitely vibe with this movie because it's definitely like a drama, but it's got this undercurrent. The Hoskins and the mom and the cooking show stuff, I think you would be like real interested in it.
Okay, Felicia's Journey
Yeah.
added to the list. Okay, my number 4. I'm doing that
Wait, no,
now,
you're
right?
number 2 now.
Wait, no, don't do
Yeah,
that.
we're counting down. We've been going 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
We have
Yeah.
been? Okay. Okay. These aren't in order
But you
for
have
me.
been counting. You've been saying 5, 4, 3, 2. On the last one, you said this is 4, and I said no, it's 3. So this would be 2. Either way,
Medication's
that's
gonna
fine.
wear
That's
off
fine.
real soon. And then I'm just
By the time we get to 1, you're
then,
just like,
then I'm on Dimetap time, baby.
that's
It's
okay.
just it's gonna get cracked.
I'll talk faster.
Okay. No, you're good. You're good. So no, it's just gonna get wild and wacky. So number 2 for me, I have proselytized this movie a ton back when we had Killer POV. I remember talking about this on at least a couple of the episodes. It's been a while since I mentioned it. So for any of our new listeners, I wanted to give love to the 2007 film Animorph, with Willem Dafoe in it. You still haven't seen it. Fuck this, Elric. Come on.
It's taken me a while.
12 years we've been doing this together, and you still have not watched Animorph, and I've been singing its praises for a while.
January 31st, 2025, I'm watching that movie. January 31st. That will be the day. I'm watching Animorph on the 31st of January.
I keep waiting. It's Willem Dafoe. What was the wildest thing about this on this research round? So Mick Foley's in it. Mick Foley plays an antiques dealer, which is great because Mick Foley, he's a nice guy in real life. Like we had him on Fangoria radio back when I used to be like an assistant on that show. This is back like eons ago. He would come on occasionally because he was friends with our host Dee Snider, and he was always such a sweet guy. And so he actually does a really believable job playing this kind of like soft-spoken antique dealer in this. But then what I found out is I was kind of like, Mick Foley is a weird casting choice to play a soft-spoken antique dealer, right? I look this time, this film is produced by Shane McMahon, who I know means nothing to you, but in wrestling world, that's Vince McMahon's son. So Vince McMahon is president of WWE. He's just this massive guy. He just got brought up on all these like sexual assault charges. He had to step down. Shane's his son. So the fact that Shane produced this is pretty wild. So horror and wrestling, they've always had these kind of crossovers where, WWE is produced. It's not their first time producing horror films, but this didn't seem to be a WWE production as much as just Shane McMahon, which is kind of cool. So I'm sure that's how Mick Foley got involved. It also has Deborah Harry in some of the scenes, but the whole kind of stick of it is that it's Willem Dafoe as an investigator hunting a serial killer who kills and then leaves messaging through different art styles. So like one, he'll use camera obscura, and the next one he uses forced perspective. And so he's literally turning the bodies into works of art, but then you have to look at the bodies a specific way or interact with them or do something to them to get the message to appear of what's going to happen next. So it's just, I love this mix of art, of stuff hidden inside of art. And so he's making sculptures out of the bodies. Like it gets real fucked up, or he's leaving messages that you will only see if you look at it this way while the light is shining from this direction. And so it's just got this strong mix of super fucking grisly serial killer movie with this really strong art vibe. And Willem Dafoe is great in it. He plays this down on his luck, burnt out detective who could give two fucks, but is reading up a lot on art history to try to stay one step ahead of this serial killer. So yeah, this one, it's just, you would like this.
No,
how have you not?
No, I'll do it.
I want to hear about this on Deep Cuts next week, Elric.
It won't be next week because I'll have to pick something from what I see up there, but I'm not gonna have much time.
Yeah, this isn't a plain movie. I'm not kidding when I say it gets pretty fucking grisly. So yeah, not quite a plain movie, but that said, you got to watch this one. It's really good. So that's Animorph 2007.
The next one, I did not remember much of the plot. I'd seen it and really liked it. I saw it on VHS when I was pretty young. Turns out it doesn't have a Blu-ray, so I had to ask my friend who has Brian, who has a DVD of it, to rip it and send me the rip. That's how hard it was. It wasn't streaming anywhere. I was really bummed. But it's a Paul Verhoeven film, and I'm like, a Paul Verhoeven film should not have trouble, especially one that won tons of awards. So this is called The Fourth Man. And all I remembered was seeing it when I was young and thinking, man, that's really Hitchcockian. Like it was one of the most Hitchcockian films I'd seen. Watching it now, it made me laugh because I'm like, it feels like a complete tracing for Basic Instinct, which is just funny because this movie got him RoboCop, not Basic Instinct's way later. This movie led directly to RoboCop, and I'm like, it's funny because really it's very close to Basic. I'd love to see a double feature of this
Oh
and Basic Instinct.
yeah.
It'd be amazing. Um,
Even the cover, I mean, that looks
even
like
her
Sharon
look, no, even her
Stone.
look by the
Yeah,
end of this
her
movie,
look.
it's very, and he didn't write Basic Instinct, so he directed it, but he didn't write it. So my brain's like, wow, it really feels like when you watch this, it's his training movie for that. But this is a terrific movie, and good to talk about it, see if people put it out. But it opens with this miserable, he's just kind of awful main character. He's a writer. You assume at the start, and this is a big part of it, I wouldn't say otherwise, but you assume he's an alcoholic guy. His lover lives in the house, and he seems really like an asshole to him. The guy's playing violin, doesn't seem very nice. The opening shot is him completely naked, putting on a robe and just walking along like everything's hanging out for a good 5 minutes. Verhoeven does not care. He's like, yep, let it go. And this is a film from Holland, and he is kind of miserable, always drunk, and he's off to do a lecture. So he has to take a train. And he has visions of almost imagining killing his lover, and with a bra, he's imagining strangling him, but then you realize he didn't do it. But either way, he is not a protagonist that we are going to necessarily sympathize with. He goes off to do this lecture, and when he gets there, everyone treats him super well. He's obviously a good writer, but just not a very good person. And this beautiful blonde woman is just filming him with a camera, and he's like, what is she doing? And she's the treasurer of our club, and she's just, she just likes to video, tape the people. It's actually film. And she of course comes up to him and is very Sharon Stone and very cool, calm, cool blonde, Hitchcock blonde. And she's like, you're going to probably miss the last train, but you could just stay with me tonight. And he's like, okay. Even though he seems way more into guys, because before he got on that train, there's a young, attractive man walking along, and he gets on a train, and our character runs after the train, even after it's departed, is running side by side to the window because he wants to get off with this young guy, which plays a role later because the next morning he wakes up after sleeping with her and sees in her open files that she is in a relationship with that boy that he saw on the train. So, and it's kind of, that part's never explained. Like, how the hell did that seems so coincidental? And she's like, yeah, I'm having a relationship because my husband died recently, and she's all sad about that. Basically, he starts manipulating her, saying, oh, well, maybe you should bring him here and I'll see what he's like. And he obviously is just trying to hook up with this guy, even by being in a relationship with her. She's also extremely wealthy. And then through the proceedings, he discovers all these films, and one is husband number one, then husband number two, husband number three. All of them have come to very violent fates. So she's married 3 young men in a row, and all have died, and she has gotten richer and richer. And now he is wondering who will be the fourth man, as in the fourth victim of hers. And he's not sure if it's him or this young lover. And it becomes kind of Hitchcockian. And it's really edgy and freaking, it's a really cool movie. And so it's, it being a kind of a Black Widow type storyline. So it's I like picking like these different perspectives of what a serial killer could be. And like I said, totally is the kind of outline for a Basic Instinct type of movie, which is, more obviously, this is sexy, but in that ugly kind of way. And Basic Instinct's a lot more glossy in terms of the sexual aspects of it. But definitely a movie that should be, available on Blu-ray, and people should be talking about it because it's so well made. I mean, he's, all Spedders is great too. All his early movies got him, the Hollywood career because they were such, they feel big, but all the same themes,
100. I've never heard of this one either. So you're pulling out some good
The Fourth Man, yeah,
here.
definitely. I should give you the copy that I got just because I don't feel bad because it's a friend of ours who actually owns the DVD and it's not available. So I'm happy to share.
Excellent. Okay, I'm taking us into my number 5, and this one's a little polarizing.
Slash
number one. Oh my God.
We count down here. We count down.
We count down. It's true. We do. I'm fucking up this week. But this one, it's a little polarizing, but I rewatched it for our Patreon show last year and surprisingly enjoyed it. So right after Barbie came out, I did a thing on the Patreon show where I kind of went back and watched a lot of Ryan Gosling's horror forays that he had in his early career. And he had a lot of them where he was just like, showing up in the background of a bunch. He has a really long, long acting career going all the way back to like Disney stuff when he was a kid. But sometime when he was in his late teens, early 20s, he appears as a college student in I didn't even write down the year on this one, Murder by Numbers. And this is, 2002. I did write it down. This is two high school students that are like hyper gifted. It's Michael Pitt and Ryan Gosling, and they're both supposed to be like juniors in high school, where Michael Pitt is playing this like super smart, really withdrawn, kind of keeps to himself, kind of black coat club kid, doesn't really have any friends. Ryan Gosling is this super smart, super handsome, outgoing guy, really athletic, wealthy family, but still really smart. Like everybody is just assuming he's going to go off and be a lawyer because he's just so good looking and charismatic. And they decide that they are going to use their smarts to try to commit a perfect murder. And Sandra Bullock is the one who's investigating this. And she catches that kind of a lot of the crimes are kind of linking back to these two high school kids, but very ancillarily. Like she can't directly connect anything because they are kind of crafting out these perfect murders. But this is another one where you know who the killers are from the start. You know for a fact that it is Ryan Gosling and Michael Pitt committing the murders. It's just kind of waiting the cat and mouse game of getting Sandra Bullock to kind of catch up with them. I liked this a lot because, well, one, it's Ryan Gosling in an early role, and he's just as charismatic and, glows on screen like he does in all of his future stuff. But I love the idea of trying to commit the perfect murder. And I feel like that was part of Copycat too, of trying to commit the thing that is highly complicated. That was the thing, is they wanted to do these highly complicated murders. They had to have style to them. They had to have pizzazz. It couldn't just be, I've stabbed somebody at the ATM machine and then run off into the night. It had to be more complicated than that, but it had to go out of their way to make sure that nothing was ever traceable. And so I always had forgotten about this one for a really long time, but I rewatched it last year for the Patreon show and just found it to be a lot better than I remembered it back in 2002. So that is Murder by Numbers.
Yeah, I saw it and have no memories at all. I just remember Sandra Bullock was in it. I couldn't even tell you anything about it. So funny.
There was a movie that came out around the same time called A Perfect Murder that I always confused
with
it
Michael
with
Douglas, yeah.
With Michael Douglas, and that was okay.
That was a remake of Dial M for Murder.
Yep. And
it was okay.
It was just
okay.
Okay. But I always got them confused because this is about trying to commit the perfect murder, but it's not a perfect murder. That's the Michael Douglas movie. This is Murder by Numbers.
Yeah, interesting.
So.
Well, one that would be is now canon. I think it's new canon because it finally got a Criterion. But I think of all the movies that influenced Longlegs, the thing I see most in it is one of my favorites ever, which is Kiyoshi Kurosawa's Cure. I think there's more Cure in Longlegs than anything, like just the way, just the unexplained vibes and the mesmer quality. He's obviously using a form of mesmer in Longlegs that isn't ever fully explained, but it's there. So I think the DNA is there. So that was the obvious one. I wasn't going to put it because I do think that's not canon. But my favorite discovery for me in the last like 3 or 4 years doing both shows, I can't remember which one it came up on first, Deep Cuts here or the other show, is this film called Angel Dust, which I would be surprised if Oz has seen this, but I think this might be even more close to Longlegs than even Cure, and it's a Cure-like movie. This is Gakuro Ishii, which is a director that you liked his, what is the Burst City? That's
is it? Oh yeah, that's his punk rock
one that you liked, but I've never seen that one. But he made these 2 serial killer ones very different. One's called Angel Dust and one's called Labyrinth of Dreams. Labyrinth of Dreams is one of the most beautiful films I've ever seen, but that's set in the 50s. This is a very modern. People mostly will remember the VHS cover because of the font of the words.
I was going to say, as soon as I saw this, I immediately remembered the cover, but I've never actually seen it.
Of all the movies I could recommend, you will love this. This is basically at Monday at 6 p.m. in the subway, and very busy Tokyo subway. there'll be a woman who'll just suddenly drop dead. And they start to see that they're pinpricks of a lethal injection to these women. And there's no sign of a killer, no idea. Our lead, so somebody's been targeting these people. We have this brilliant psychologist, a female psychologist, who's basically being called in to try to profile, try to come up with something. And the whole movie has this almost green color tint to the whole movie. So it's very, sickly almost. And she starts investigating things, and they start to suspect this famous psychologist who was being used to deprogram people who had been in a religious cult in Japanese culture. Must have come from a real story, but so he was a deprogrammer. But now they're suspecting that he's doing something else, to like when he's deprogramming, that he's doing something worse. And she used to be an associate of his, and so she basically is going to this. So it's almost like I wouldn't say he's Hannibal Lecter. It's a very different type of character. And it's slowly dragging. So you have the deaths happening on the trains, which are very beautiful. You have the investigation, and then slowly she is being pulled in. But you also get the feeling that everything you've watched was so as she would eventually get pulled in. And it's so mysterious, so beautifully shot, this guy's like, I think, one of the best. Like, I've only discovered his work in the last couple of years. I remember seeing the cover of Angel Dust all the way back in video store days. It was very striking, but I never saw it. And the films I have now seen by him, I'm so excited about him. As there's other films I want to track down, like Electric Dragon has a big guitar on it, and just some very interesting movies. I think there's a Manchurian Candidate, Manhunter quality to this movie, and it's so terrific. I would love. This is If anyone knows Oz, ask them if he did see this. I bet he probably didn't, but he would watch it and go, "Oh, interesting," because it feels like maybe Cure took some stuff from this as well, like in terms of that quality, but in a good way, in a way that. These are my favorite types, where not everything is A to B. And there's also a couple really weird twists by the very end of this film that took me by surprise. So Angel Dust, again, I don't think there's a great copy, but I bet you it's on YouTube, and well worth your time.
Okay, add it to my list. Okay, hitting a couple of titles that I'm going to say also, I just wanted to quickly mention. Identity 2003.
Yeah.
I loved this film so much. We always
yeah.
kind of talk about how the ending was a little bit of
Yeah.
but the build and the setup of what the fuck is going on was just so good.
Yeah.
And then where it goes is a little, but I'll put up with that at the end because of the prior 90 minutes. Frenzy 1973, by far my fave Hitchcock film.
Movie.
About a serial killer in London. I Saw the Devil 2010, South Korean serial, more of like a revenge film about a serial killer. Really good, really brutal. And then the one that I was really excited to talk about, but I spent half my day Googling the plot line and could never find the title. You were the one who recommended this to me. Group of criminology students are taken to a place like Alcatraz, where it's a jail island that is isolated and abandoned, and their professor has set up a crime that he wants them to solve, but then real murders start. What the fuck is the name of that movie?
If you're talking about a movie with LL Cool J and Christian Slater, because if you are, it's called Mindhunters.
Mindhunters, thank you. If you
so
just Google like criminology students, serial killer movie island, like you start getting like true crime stuff.
It's a pretty wild, freaking entertaining movie.
Mindhunters. Oh my God, that one. I know that you had watched that.
I think it popped up on the New Bev.
2 years ago.
I think it popped up at the New Bev or something. Maybe it played at the New Bev in one of Phil's all-nighters that I wasn't at. And then I was like, oh, I remember that movie. That looked terrible. And I watched it. It was so much fun. So
it was so great. Really it was such a fun movie. So Mindhunter is definitely one of my favorite serial killer discoveries of the last couple of years.
A couple obvious ones, like one that should be canon. I think a lot of people still don't know about it, but it's the most disturbing one you could see, and that's Angst. It's still the movie. It's more of a spree kill. There's a really good one called Citizen X, which is it's a Donald Sutherland. It's about a real serial killer. And it's pretty disturbing. And then my favorite of the entertainment ones, like you just said with Mindhunters, I think I've talked about it back on Killer PvP, but I am a huge fan of Night Moves with Christopher Lambert and the chess tournaments and the serial killer. I just think it's so much fun, even though it's silly. And then lastly, I'd say it's very serious, more like a drama. But if you love Zodiac, which how could you not love Zodiac? The Pledge by Sean Penn, starring Jack Nicholson, is really worth watching. It's a little frustrating because it's about a cop obsessed with a serial killer that is never really solved, and like Zodiac, what that frustration does to you. But it's a very interesting film, nevertheless. So, I mean, there's hundreds we could go on, but
Oh my God,
it's
yeah.
fun to throw out a few good ones. So,
Well, we hope that you have enjoyed creeping through our serial killer list. If you are in Montreal today, please say hi to Elric as he does his live show.
no, it would if this is coming out Friday morning.
Oh wait, it's already happened.
Yes,
That's
it's already
Thursday
happened. But
evening.
Friday night, you could still
Come see Dead
if there's
Thing.
tickets, come see Dead Things, and if there's not, come to the Sunday one, where I'm sure there'd be more. Yeah, very excited about that. And come say we need a what's a good term? Oh, come up to me, and if you've heard this episode, I will know you're a listener, a true one, because you come up and say to me, "Mind Hunters," and shake my hand. Say "Mind Hunters." That will be a sign that you've listened
That's the
to
code.
the most recent episode on Friday. You have to be a real one to listen to this and then come find us. And if you say it in French, I will give you something. I'll have to have something in my pocket. I'll have something.
She's gonna carry around a
If you
basket.
say
of
Mind
poutine
Hunters in
and
French,
hand you a single French fry.
Les Mind
That's
Hunters. If you say that to me, Les Mind Hunters. like that, exactly like that.
You should probably figure it out with the actual French
I'm in the
word is,
middle
so.
of a show. I can't possibly Duolingo right now. But anyway, yes. Excited. Definitely sad that you won't be there because that was going to be something really fun to look forward to. And now I won't say I'll be alone though, because I think I'll have like 8 or 9 people.
Yeah, you got a whole crew
That
of
should be a
people
good
with
crew,
you
yeah.
that are going to drag you around to eat all the poutine and smoked
Oh
meats
my
you
God,
can
that
handle.
movie I talked about today at the top, which was the one about the vampire. There's a scene, and the vampires in that movie can't eat food; they can only drink blood. And so she goes and sees some people eating the poutine. I've never even seen this, and it looked so good. I was like, "Oh my God, that looks like the greatest thing ever."
So I admittedly am not one for gravy. So having somebody pour it on my French fries, like I even at one restaurant asked for the poutine without the gravy, and you would have thought I had like asked for like a severed head on a plate. Like I had just defiled poutine because all I wanted was kind of like cheese fries, because you can get fries and then the cheese curds are really good, but then like not getting the gravy.
For the gravy.
So here's the fun thing: you can get poutine at the movie theater there, because while I was there, I can't even remember what I saw. While I was there one summer for Fantasia, it may have been last summer or the summer before, I was there for like a week for Fantasia. There was some other big horror film that was doing a release. I want to say Meg. And I was like, no, I still have to go see this major release horror film. So I went to the movie theater, like the AMC in Montreal. They have poutine at the movie theaters there, which was pretty cool. So I opted for the poutine over the popcorn with the gravy. You got to try it. And I remember that they have a lot of smoked meats, that was kind of the thing. It was like smoked meats and poutine.
Well,
so,
I'll be bringing back some angry fan mail for your absence. So you get ready. You feel better.
I will. I'm the steroids and Sudafed have kind of reached their point. So now's where I drug myself so I can go to sleep instead of coughing my head off
tomorrow.
all night.
Hopefully it's not the big C.
Yeah, I'm hoping so too. Okay, y'all have a fantastic week. In the meantime, please check us out on Patreon. We just did an amazing episode with some really cool discoveries and kind of a mind connection, like telepathy theme was our last show.
Montreal. Some Montreal films and some mind
control.
Montreal.
Mind control, astral projection, and Montreal. And we will be back in a week or two with another round of kind of wild films over there on Patreon. And otherwise, we'll be back in 2 weeks with another fun show. And hopefully I have a voice back by then. And Elric will be back from Montreal. Thank you all so much for listening. Good night. The Colors of the Dark podcast is a Fangoria production. Producers and co-hosts are Rebekah McKendry and Elric Kane. Executive producers are Tara Ainsley and Abby Gould. Sonic branding by Michael Rodriguez. And, of course, our amazing sound engineer, Ernie Hurtado.